If you are interested in marketing, branding, creative strategy, customer acquisition, or customer experience systems and design, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Prime People Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Konikow. This is the channel where I bring on some of the most talented people on the planet and dig into their brain on specific topics. We've had guests like Scott McGilvery, Ryan Serhant, and today we have none other than Ram Castillo. He is a design-focused thinker that has worked with incredibly high-level brands such as Audi, the McDonald's Group, Qantas, Telstra, Google, AMEX, and the Louis Vuitton Group. I mean, that is a mouthful. He has worked with some of the top branding firms on the planet. I've had the pleasure of spending probably hundreds of hours with this man at this point and looking at how he looks at all of those things I just explained. We all know branding is important. We all know marketing is important. We all know customer experience is important. So this is going to be a fun episode. Make sure you smash that notification button so you don't miss any future episodes. And we're going to welcome my guest, Mr. Ram Castillo. Ram, how are you doing today?
Hey, mate. Good to see you, Justin. I'm really well. Yourself?
I'm fantastic. I appreciate you making the time for us. You're at the other end of the globe. Tell the guests or tell the viewers where you are.
Yeah, so I'm from Sydney. It is in the future for some, but yeah, I've been in Sydney, Australia my whole life, and excited to chat all things design thinking applied to problem solving.
Yeah, it's super interesting. When I was giving your bio, I fumbled my words a little bit because normally it's like you work with one big brand or you work with two, and most people have an experience maybe working with one design firm. You have worked with a bevy of them. How did you find yourself in that position? Maybe give us a little bit of your history.
Yeah, so real quick, context, not that it's too important, but I'm technically in my mid 30s, let's call it, and I studied design at design college. And at the time, a lot of people that pursue that path really study visual communication, graphic design, or interaction design. But the discipline that is design is reverse engineering a desired outcome. And there is a design thinking methodology, a process, whether it looks like a visual artifact at the end, whether it be a website, an app, a brand, a social media marketing campaign, whatever it is, right through to designing a whole service or business. It really comes from looking at a sequential process in many ways that you can dive in between. So we'll unpack that in a bit. But I got exposed to this through studying design, completed that back in 2004. So we're talking 17 years ago.
You look like a kid. Where did that itch come from? Like, where was your interest in design? Like, what were you like as a kid?
Yeah, so I'm of Filipino background, but fortunate enough to have had my parents migrate to Australia when I was 1 year old. And so I already looked through the lens of, gosh, I could have lived another life. To give some perspective here, dad is one of 11, mum is one of 5. My dad's father passed away when he was only a 3-year-old baby. So my dad had to grow up really fast. They used education as a way out. He completed marine transportation, mechanical engineering,
Wow.
2 degrees.
Wow.
And we got to Australia and those 2 degrees were not recognized.
What?
So there are these nuances where you go, okay, what am I going to do with this opportunity? I understood that at a young age. I remember a moment, 4 years old, in our little apartment. Mum was cooking spaghetti, and I can almost smell the memory. She was just talking to me about life for her as a child when she was my age. It was 4 years old, 5 years old, and she said, "Ram, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And at the time, I would always be distracted. So to your question, I would always collect empty tissue boxes, toilet paper rolls, cardboard boxes, and I would build cities, robots, cars. And we didn't have iPads back then. So she said, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I was distracted. I said, "I don't know, Mum. I just want to make stuff." And then she said, okay. She stopped cooking, put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Well, whatever you want to be, make sure you dream big." She said, "Make sure you dream much, much bigger." And so from that instance, she gave me the permission to try and explore. Fundamental for design, fundamental for creativity. To not be firmly gripped on a specific outcome. Exploration is important when we talk about creativity. I get asked a lot, what is the definition of creativity to me? I say it's in 3 words: making unconventional connections. Making unconventional connections. When you piece different things, I believe everyone is creative. You piece your lived experience, you piece your formal education, you piece the path that you've taken, you piece your culture, you piece your values, your worldview. There's something in everyone that can express or create creativity. And that's why I guess, for the listeners, and Justin and I, we connected in many ways through entrepreneurship, in helping businesses, and in Justin's case, in the real estate world. But it's less about the sector you're in and more about understanding that you have a point of view that is probably not easily accessible to the majority. And it just so happens that I ended up really being bad at a lot of things. I was the shortest in school. In fact, I was bullied severely in primary school. I had 16 stitches and had 3 broken arms before the age of 11. I was horrible in many things, from maths to English to science. I avoided science altogether, but I was drawn to art and creativity. So for me, it was just knowing, where is the pocket that you play? And this all really links to personal branding as well, because I often say that personal branding, branding in any entity, personal or business, it's what is the space that you occupy in the hearts and minds of your customers relative to your competitors. Now, I'll say that one more time, okay? You occupy a space in a buyer's mind. The influence of that, okay? And I'll break it down into personality, credibility, reputation. The influence of that is shaped by those 3 things off the bat. What is your personality? What's your credibility? What's your reputation? That has to be measured against a baseline of what is available in the marketplace, right? So now we think of maybe, okay, cheap versus expensive, but what else? Introvert, extrovert, what else? Are you someone that is, for example, a fan of Nike versus Adidas? Well, Nike stands for just doing it. They're very practical. Adidas stands for impossible is nothing. So they're more aspirational. So when we select businesses, brands, all of this is part of human behavior. It's a psychology that is intertwined with design thinking. It's really understanding what is your worldview, knowing that you as a business are an extension of my existing worldview. So when I buy you, I'm actually thinking, what does that make me? What kind of person am I when I buy from you, when I buy from your brand? I know that's a scattered thing, but effectively, mate, I pursued design because I was just infinitely curious, and my parents gave me the permission to do so.
Well, I think it's a very in-depth answer, right? And I'll extrapolate what I was kind of thinking as you were going through that journey. Yes, I happen to speak to real estate agents. My moonshot with this channel is to explain to them that the same principles that apply in my world, marketing and sales, apply to a coffee shop or a custom sneaker shop, or it doesn't matter what you do. Truthfully, everything that you just said, you need to be able to understand your voice, your branding to the world, so you can attract the right customers through effective marketing and then give them a customer experience that tracks to everything that you say you are, right? I'm wearing a hat right now. This is Peter McKinnon's logo. So Peter McKinnon is a creator on YouTube, amazing photographer. I love photography. I'm a hobbyist. I carry a camera around with me. Nobody really knows I do it. I love taking pictures. I'll actually show you one super quick. So I love your eye for design on this. Let me share my screen.
Into that.
Yes. So this is a photo I took of the beach in Grand Bend.
Wow, gorgeous.
Yeah, where I live, Sunset, I used an ND filter, all these little tricks that I learned from Peter McKinnon. But the whole point of what I'm saying here is this hat is a representation of Peter. So people that see this hat on the podcast automatically know who he is, make that association. They're like, oh, Justin likes Peter. I like Peter. If I shop with Justin, we may talk about Peter, or maybe we'll meet Peter, right? So, what you're saying is all the choices that we make effectively track to what your branding and marketing is. And I think this is where I really want to dig into it with you. People try to brand themselves as something they are not, or they think that sales are tricking or manipulating consumers. I think your eye for design is really bringing out the core values of who you are, and then learning how to do that from an effective messaging standpoint. So if I was brand new and I was like, man, Ram, I'm just getting into the real estate industry. I want to sell high-end luxury properties, work with developers. I've got no track record. How do I even begin to find my voice?
Okay, I'll give you a very quick example of a framework that they can use and adopt straight away. 2 circles on a page, 2 circles overlapping each other. On one side, it has the word appealing, ? What's appealing about you and your business? Okay. The other circle has another word. It says exclusive ? What's exclusive about you? Now, this has taken me years to distill in such a simple framework. Okay. So there is this, now there are these 2 buckets, and by nature, you are looking through 2 different lenses, and wherever the more that you can overlap, and I'll give an example, but the more that they overlap, the more competitive you'll be. This is how I would suggest anyone that's looking to enter a marketplace. So let's say you're a real estate agent, or you want to build some type of presence in the marketplace. So that's what we're talking about. We first need to understand and accept that we need to compete. If you don't understand that there is a competition to be had, then you're already planning to fail, because we need a competitive advantage. Now, this is the power of branding. And I'm going to piece together a couple of things, Justin, for the listeners, if I may. So firstly, let's just get a few shared vocabulary right. Marketing, branding. Marketing is saying what you do. You're broadcasting a message. So it's important to understand, what are you even saying? Branding is doing what you say. So strategy number 1, already. Too many businesses are articulating their value proposition in a way that they cannot actually do. They cannot meet it. It would be better to articulate a message that is smaller, more niche, than saying something grand that you can't even meet, or worse, so general that there is no impact on that. Okay. The other thing is, marketing is really how they find you, but branding is why they buy you. And let me explain for the listeners, right? It's like this. Knowing that there are alternatives in the marketplace. I might choose Sally. I might choose John. I might choose Bill. I might choose, Melissa as a real estate agent, let's say. Okay. You might be very out there and loud and super high energy, but you might not be. You might be super low key, super low energy, calm, introvert. And this is important, because knowing who you are by nature is already the best place to start. That's why what's appealing and what's exclusive to you is important. And it goes back to this thought. If there is a market, let's say there is a pie, there is a space. In order to be very popular enough to be paid, popular enough to be paid in a transaction, a purchase, if you are that popular, it also means that you will be very unpopular to the other end, and you will be very neutral to the majority. This is an acceptance that I feel a lot of business owners have who are starting out, they don't accept. And that's why we get to the whole thing around, but I don't want to alienate people, Ram or Justin. I don't want to alienate people. The thing is, you must.
Yeah.
Because it's inevitable, right?
No, I laughed because I've heard that so many times. One of the first things I do with new agents when they come to Prime is I sit down. I'm like, who are you? What do you do? And where do you do it? We need to get very specific. And they're like, I don't want to cast out anybody. I really want to be known as the luxury agent in our area, but I'll sell anything. I'll sell $100,000 condo, like I'll sell a $10 million property. So my messaging needs to be broad. And I always have the same conversation with them. I'm like, I sell everything, right? I just took on a client. We're selling their condo. It's $205,000. We're doing an acquisition for them. They got rolled over by their landlord. It's a passion for us right now. I told her, I'm like, I'm going to give you $20 million service. I don't care what your price point is. But from a branding and messaging standpoint, I'm known for luxury properties, new development, commercial, higher level kind of thinking and strategy, which is why when I wrote down appealing and exclusive, it's my connections and my contacts for sure. People call me because they want access to my network. They want my knowledge and my expertise. And those are exclusive as well as appealing to the people that work with me. But my messaging has to be concise. And I think you touched on something that speaks to the real estate industry en masse, is this push-pull of they want every single client and they're running around like a chicken with their head cut off. So how would you change that perception?
Okay, so maybe this might help, this example. If I was to say to you watching or listening, which do you think is the best? And I'm not going to give you any context other than your preference to this. Which do you think is the best? Okay, so you've got an owl on your head there as an icon, Justin. An owl, so let's say a bird, a fish, or a gorilla. Okay, so just sit with that, and we'll use Justin as an example here. But which do you think is the best? Okay, and there's no wrong answer here. You are drawn to one of them. Okay, a bird, a fish, an ape, a gorilla, let's say. Justin, tell me.
Oh, I'm struggling. I like fishing. I want to be a gorilla and just plow through walls. But it's funny, the association with the owl, the wisdom, the flight, and Peter McKinnon are drawing me back towards the owl for sure.
Okay, the owl. Okay, let's just say, right. Yeah. But I appreciate that. Now, here's the thing. It's the same with you. It's the same with you. There is a layer to this that you have to ask. Your value is in proportion to the type of problem, okay? So if I was to now add a layer and say, which is the strongest? Well, yeah, a gorilla, bloody strong animal, isn't it? If I say which has the ability to explore the ocean, well, none of the others can even try. Mm-hmm. It's the fish. But then if I was to say, well, a fish would be a terrible tree climber, you can't get a fish to climb. My point is this, everyone, please let this land. When we talk about value propositions, we are looking at the customer journey, and we're looking at the particular time and place that the pain is felt. Let me explain. If I wanted to cut something in the garden, there is everything from a chainsaw right through to garden trimmers, scissors. I'm not going to buy a chainsaw to cut a rose bush, would I? It's the same with your business, if you're listening to this. You cater for a section of your customer's journey. It's just like a doctor. There's a GP, general practitioner, right through to a specialist.
Mhm.
Where are you, real estate person? And now we're getting somewhere. And then we add layers. Am I servicing the lower end of the market, the higher end? Am I servicing local, national, global? These are the things that we need to understand. Just like Dwayne Johnson, if I was to say The Rock, and you might have heard me say this before in our conversations, Justin, on Clubhouse. But if I was to say to you, which actor in all of human history is the greatest actor in terms of talent and craft, you don't immediately think Dwayne Johnson, yet he is the highest paid actor in the world right now. And you can check the stats. I believe it was 2020 or 2021. Okay. Like by miles. And second was like Ryan Reynolds.
Wow.
But here's the thing. They're playing out this exact example I gave. They know their niche. They know their pocket. And you see Dwayne Johnson, he's built a brand where he is the strong gorilla type. He exudes that. So he gets booked constantly because he knows what he's good at and what he's not. The overlap of appealing and exclusive.
And he really has separated himself from the pack with that clarity of purpose. And it's interesting as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the agent that wants to speak to the entire market, and they can to a certain degree, because if they know that they want to provide a luxury or premium high cost experience, like some agents charge more than others, right? There's no set commission fee, and we're on the higher end of the spectrum. People that want to sell a $100,000 condo may want a luxury experience and are happy to pay for service. I think that's what they need to focus on. So, if I'm going into a premium service, right, and I've established myself as somebody's paying for a luxury service, I now want to provide them that luxury service. I think a lot of agents go wrong on a few key things like communication, setting up expectations and then not following through, and people feel let down. I have a guy on this podcast that worked with Audi and Louis Vuitton. So explain to me, Ram, if I'm buying a $10 million compound for you in Canada, because we're going to hang out and start businesses here, and you want that luxury experience, where should my focus be on the client experience side of things to deliver on a promise that I made you?
Okay. Probably a good time then to share the design thinking process that can be adopted by anyone. Okay. It's very simple. It's 5 parts. I'll explain, and then maybe Justin, you can pepper in some examples, and then we can massage this a bit more with a bit more specificity, so that you can guide me to give value in this way.
I'll give you case studies for sure. My head will be pointing down for all the viewers on YouTube. It's only because I'm taking notes. This guy drops bombs, so make sure you give him a follow. But go ahead. Let's go through the 5-step process.
Excellent. So in any design thinking process, there is going to be this type of sequence or framework, but it's not linear necessarily, because you can jump in between. When you get more information, you might hop between these 5, but I'll explain it. Empathy, define problem statements, ideate, prototype, and test and iterate. Okay, those 5. I'll unpack it very quickly, and then we can weave in some real life examples. So when we talk about empathy or empathize, what we're really doing here is looking to understand the person or people involved. Now, let me make this clear. This isn't, and I have to call this out, this isn't subconsciously reaffirming your conscious bias or something like that. It's a lot of the times we already have an idea in our head, or we want to validate something that we already feel is true.
We think we know what they want, right? Which is a huge mistake people make, even on YouTube. I made it for close to 7 years. And then I was like, what do my audience want? Like, what content are they watching? And it changed the game for me. So carry on.
Yes, exactly. So how do you do this? Survey, interview, observation. There are so many information gathering tools, but the point is you are looking to understand. You shouldn't even be thinking about what problems they are. They give them to you. They, the people that you're looking to help, and now you can use this already, right? Maybe I can use this process to better my internal processes. Maybe I can use this on my employees. Yes, there is an internal organizational side to this, but we're currently just talking about the front facing, the client or the customer. Okay, so we're looking to understand, what do they need? What are their pains and gains, as we call it? You can use pains, gains, you can use needs and wants. There's different frameworks you can use when you facilitate this, but effectively, you want to understand them to arrive at, sure, a persona, avatar, sure, that's the beginning. But just be careful when we talk about personas and avatars. We're not just talking about demographic markers, we're talking about behavioral and circumstantial instances. Let me give you a very quick example. Recently, I helped a client in this process. They are a digital health clinic for men. They were wanting to launch their fifth or sixth product. They've been around for 6 years. Telehealth, call up a doctor, they send you prescription drugs to men, right? That's the service. They started off with hair loss and psychology and sexual health issues for men. Now they wanted to launch weight loss product. Okay. Now, already they introduced bias. They said, Ram, when you do your research, asking the Australian men about their weight and losing weight, what we sold to investors was a holistic approach to weight loss. So just bear that in mind, Ram. But okay, already I'm like, okay, you're introducing bias. That's okay. I'm going to facilitate it. So I'll gather the information. Guess what we found? I interviewed a whole bunch of Aussie guys, right? Just speaking to them, just like this. Recorded it, wrote notes, synthesized the data. Almost every single person said, first of all, they cut me off and said, Ram, sorry, mate. What do you mean by holistic? Haha, insight number one. We have so much knowledge. We think that the market understands what the hell we're talking about. They're in kindergarten level most of the time. They don't know what you're saying. Okay, here's another thing. The personas, I'll say 3 of the 5 that we found. Let's call one of them Performance Pete. Let's call another one of them Dad Bod Dave. Let's call another one of them Obese Oliver. All 3, see, different already. All of them want to lose weight. But there's a Performance Pete who's a shredded Adonis. We're like, how much weight can you lose? Well, the motivation for Performance Pete is for performance. Maybe they do ultra marathons. Maybe they do, CrossFit. There's a different reason for a Performance Pete. Now let's go to a Dad Bod Dave. Dad Bod Dave used to be fit, very, very athletic, has had a kid, maybe a second kid on the way is what we're hearing. And they are so busy at work. They're still climbing up the corporate ladder. They've put on a bit of belly fat. Okay. Then we've got Obese Oliver, who says words like, Ram, I can't even recognize myself anymore. Now we're in a deeper state of pain. It's psychological. Not only can they not get off the couch because they have, they're presenting diabetes or diabetic issues or inflammation or gut health problems, a whole mix. Now we go back to that proportional problem solving. We're not going to give one injectable drugs because that's what's on offer for a Dad Bod Dave or a Performance Pete. No, meal replacements or shakes, that's okay for them. But on the flip, no, Obese Oliver can't get off the couch. They need something more heavy duty. Shakes and meal replacements and powder's not going to cut it for them. They've tried that. You see? So this is interesting. This is all from the empathy phase, right? And then we go to define. Define is basically what are the problems that are the most urgent to solve that you can solve. Think minimum effort, maximum impact. You score Write down all the problems that came up in your marketplace or in the people you spoke to. Write them down, score, pick one. Move that into the third bucket. Ideate. Now that's the fun part. Come up with ideas, come up with programs, tools, come up with services, whatever the business product or service is, right? Come up with a pair of a solution to the problem that you've just picked, right? Too many people go into ideation phase. They've missed 2 phases before the idea. They go, Ram, I've got a great idea. Okay. What is that mapping to? What's the product that you have an idea for mapping to? All right. Fourth phase is prototype. Now, this isn't just for tech, like an app. No, a prototype is simply a minimum viable version and expression of it. It could be a mood board, could be a mock-up. Doesn't have to be a 3D object, could be a service map. That's already a prototype. It's an expression of your idea. And the fifth and final is you need to test it to a small sample audience and get the users to use it. And then you loop back either to the beginning or you go back to the third phase, you jump. You go back to the third phase, maybe you come up with more ideas. That's why Facebook bloody updates every 5 seconds.
And they test multiple versions of Facebook at the same time, unbeknownst to a lot of the users, right?
Yes. And so this is how, no guessing. You see this method?
Sure.
You're not designing it for you. You're designing it for the human that you're wanting to help. So hopefully that guide is useful for listeners.
So what are the 5 steps again, just so we can summarize them?
5 steps are empathize, then you define problem statements, then you ideate, then you prototype, and then you test and iterate.
So you talked about case studies, and the reason I wanted you to do that summary is, if I look at, say, commercial leasing, which is historically an archaic industry, right? You have guys that put a sign up in the window, the sign stays up for 5 years. They always blame the market. They leave it on MLS. And I think about the commercial landlord, their problem is they need the units leased because they want the financing rolled over so they can reevaluate the building, take that capital, redeploy it somewhere else. So, or even new development, right? The housing market in Canada has shifted. Buyers are now in the driver's seat and they've really stepped back from making purchases en masse like they did in February. So it's a new set of rules. I would say empathizing and understanding both of those clients, they just want contracts, right? And what are their problems? Well, the path, like defining the problem, would essentially be traffic leads to appointments, leads to contracts, leads to negotiations and closings. So as long as I'm looking at that sequence of events, if a problem shows up with, say, the appointment to contract, then we need to identify the problem. Maybe it's pricing, maybe it's the condition of the property. But the only way that we'll know how to do that is prototyping a sequence of steps that you make with that client and then auditing that client, and asking Ram, I understand that maybe the extra charges for the lot premium or for the leasing costs and the build out are too much for you. At what price, Ram, would you be a buyer? Now gives me that information to go back to that client and see, hey, this is the entire prototype that we created. Here's your biggest pain point is the price is just killing it for him. What can we do to solve that? Is that an effective kind of breakdown of that sequence?
Absolutely. And I'm going to build off what you just said there, Justin. Okay. So in that case study, you yourself have had exposure to that sequence or that buyer's journey. Okay. Use that, but collaborate with the person, because what you've just done there is you've done that. You've asked questions to go, okay, I'm going to zero in on a friction point, price. You're zeroing in on what is an acceptable range. But even in that thinking, you can apply it to anything. Time frame. Is there a step on this sequence that's actually a hurdle for you to get to the next one? Can we remove one step? We apply this thinking to a lot of products, digital products. For those that have ever worked with a UX designer, let's say, it's can we reduce from 3 clicks down to 1?
Yeah, that's my favorite saying. I literally said it to one of my team members yesterday. Like, if we can take 20 and put it down to 2, I showed it to Jason and David. They are my mentors and taught me that, and it's awesome.
And even in that thinking, it's so powerful, right? Because you actually might come up with a new product, a disruptive product, right? A disruptive business, a disruptive business model. It is exactly what Uber, Airbnb, Afterpay, Canva, they've done it. They took a very long process of accessing something, and they've reduced it down so small to a few steps. That is design thinking.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because Canva, like thumbnails for YouTube, are one of the most challenging things out there. It took us probably 3.5 months to do this, but I trained my VA on taking a thumbnail, creating the layers that I need. So the thumbnail for your episode, when this goes live, will have been created using design thinking. Also, if I take a step back to the consumer journey and Ram is looking to buy that 10-acre compound in Canada, maybe price isn't the objection. Maybe it's the partnership agreement that you need to sign in order to transfer over to Canada, which is the sticking point, which I may not have any direct control over. But if I now know that that's the sticking point, well, it's a different set of problems I need to solve than just price. But the only way I figure that out is by talking to Ram, not making assumptions, correct?
Right. And already we know that there's a buyer and a seller, and there's a whole bunch of middle people.
Yeah. Lawyers,
So,
accountants, advisors, Uncle Jimmy telling you not to do something and he's never bought a piece of real estate, all those people.
and speaking to them, I bet you'll be able to form an insight that is so rich in information, qualitative data, right? The qualitative stuff, that the stuff that you can't get from an algorithm.
Yeah.
Okay. And what comes to mind for all the real estate folks out there is, for example, creative financing. Okay. So when we talk about creative financing, question everything. Why is it difficult for this buyer to get this type of, in touch with this type of seller, or vice versa? Is there a way? One of the questions that we use in design is the sentence structure. How might we ... How might we imagine a different version? How might we imagine a better way of doing this? You finish the sentence, but gather the people in the damn room and go, how might we do that better? Just out of curiosity, how might we do that better? It's exactly what Airbnb did. They took, this is studied in Harvard Business School as well. When they case study Airbnb, there's a technique called the 7-star method, I believe it's called. And what they did was they go, okay, what would a 4-star experience look like? Okay, what would a 5-star look like? Then they go further. What would a 6-star, what would a 7-star, all the way to a 10-star? And then they pulled back, because the 10-star ended up being like, we pick you up on a private jet.
Yeah.
Bono is waiting for you.
Not cost effective, right? Essentially.
Right. There's a choir of, like, a national choir singing as you walk down the private jet. All your bookings are paid for. You're into surfing, fishing, whatever. That's already in the place. Like, so think about that. How might we? And the beautiful thing about this is, and I hope this is landing, there is a current state version of your business, and then there is a future state. Mm-hmm. If you map your current state and you map your future state, the desired experience of a future that hasn't occurred yet, you can then overlay the two and go, okay, if I roll out some changes in the business over the next 3 to 5 years, how might that look like? Because I've just sat there with my leadership team, with my trusted counsel, and we've mapped out what a future state experience could look like. I did this with a project that I was very fortunate enough to have worked on in Australia. which is designing what the next 10 years of New South Wales transport would look like. Trains.
Yeah, interesting.
It's like saying, hey, Justin, we want you to get on a project to design what the next 10 years of the London Underground or the New York City subway experience would look like. Wow, right? How might we? Don't limit yourself on designing an experience or a product or service that is framing based on limitations that you have now. It's impossible. You have to think of ridiculous, unconventional connections. It's the only way. So many of us, how many of us go, we don't have the money, you don't have the resources. That's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is to imagine a better world, as absurd as it can be. Then you pull back into the how later.
Well, the discussion around Airbnb, I mean, if you extrapolate that, the 10-star to the 7-star is not a huge leap, because if you know I like fishing, you know I like surfing, put a fishing rod and a paddleboard at the actual location instead of getting me a guide, or put me in touch with a service provider, or have a service provider's list that I can contact on my own. You've done the homework for me. To me, that's a 7-star or almost a 10-star experience. Didn't cost you an additional dime. The New York City subway story, I don't know if you've heard this or not, but I know when they were looking to redesign it, I think it was New York, they actually used fungus. So they replicated it in a wooden maze, the exact subway system, and they said this is completely inefficient. And there was a specific type of fungus that would carve pathways that were the most efficient. So they put the fungus on the maze, they let it do its thing, and then they rerouted a lot of their tunnels based off the fungus. And you talk about a blue ocean or going somewhere completely unconventional. I think you would really enjoy reading that story.
I love that. And Justin, speaking of services, one came to mind. The Chicago airport, and any one of you can read this, it's online as well, but it's prompted by that fungus story in many ways. But sometimes the problems and solution pairing is staring at us right in the face. And I'll explain. With this Chicago airport, they were getting a lot of complaints, okay, about how long they had to wait. Passengers had to wait to collect their bags at the carousel. And they were puzzled. They were like, how can that be? You exit and the carousel's right there. It's literally 2 minutes from where you exit. We would have thought that Chicago airport were like, we thought that would have been good. But no, they spoke to their customers. They looked at the psychology. They looked at the insight, which was, hold on a minute. It's that they didn't like waiting. It wasn't about the distance. They said, it's taking too long to get our luggages. Time is perception. So what did they do? They came up with a whole bunch of ideas. Sure, they could have put activities in the area, but you know what? The simplest change was this. They moved the pickup carousel to the opposite end of the airport so that the customer had to walk 8 minutes. And the complaints dropped substantially. Wow. Because they were walking past shops, they were buying stuff. Some of those that didn't walk direct would spend maybe 2-3 minutes at a shop. Wow. And guess what? They were all happy, and all they did was move the pickup of their luggage to a longer distance. This is what I mean about the process of listening well and understanding the customer.
Fascinating. And I think the initial perception or the bias would be, well, they don't want to walk an extra 8 minutes, when in reality, they sure do, because it's an experience. So all of you, think about your business as an experience. I would hope that you go back and re-listen to this episode. He gave some tactical advice, some step-by-step things you can implement in your business. I feel like I do these episodes for myself. I got a whole page of notes on my Remarkable. I'm going to get to the rapid fire round of questions, and I'm going to get you out of here, Ram, because I know you got things to do on the other side of the planet. Up to this point, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned?
Oh gosh, greatest lesson that I've learned up until this point for me is still around what success truly is. And that for me is going to bed, and sleeping well at night, because I've had a little and I've had a lot. And I can tell you now, if there is a misalignment with your values, I know that's more of a deep answer here, but I feel I have felt rich with little money and I have felt poor with a lot of money. Let's just put it that way. So biggest lesson for me is always staying true to what you value.
I know billionaires that have everything, and I know people that have nothing. And I can tell you, those that have love, loyalty, and respect are wealthy indeed. And just because people have private jets, it does not make them rich. Um, People like you are very interesting to me because I know likely your whole life you've always known, okay, these are my core competencies, these are my core skill sets. You're working on that 80% that's really going to move your business in a big way, but you're probably, 20% curious in something you have no business being in or learning something new. What's that 20% that you're learning now or interested in that maybe isn't your main comfort zone?
Oh gosh, I would say interestingly, the more I know about human behavior, the more I feel like I don't know. I am deeply fascinated about psychology, and it is an area that I feel is just an infinite abyss. The human mind and the behavior that is underpinned by the thinking we can't outperform our beliefs. These are the things that I think I'm very curious about, that I still feel I might know what I'm talking about, but I feel like I'm going to spend a lifetime learning about it.
I love that answer. And it's that insatiable curiosity and growth. That's where I think the real success is. How has failure shaped your life?
Failure has shaped my life by allowing me to access parts of myself that were required for me to perform at this level. So, for example, a quote from one of my mentors, Debbie Millman, comes to mind. She said that the longer it takes, the longer it'll last, and the more you'll be prepared for the success when it comes. There's been a lot that's taken me a long time, and I'm still working at it, as we all are. And I feel that there is a part of this generation now that's coming up that has lost a bit of that patience and humility. I'm realizing this, that if I haven't got it, maybe I'm not ready. And I need to go to that other saying, which is like, don't complain about the results you didn't get by the work you didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things for me. It's less about failure, but more about graduating ourselves to a competency that is required. Like, how many of us, if we wanted to get surgery, we wouldn't go for a doctor that, we trust the doctor because they've had to go through so much learning and prac. And we trust the doctor that has had it in ample amounts. That we're not exempt from that. If we're to deliver what we want to the world, we have to meet some baselines, and we got to be ready to put in that work.
That's a great insight. I always compare business and life in general to jiu-jitsu, right? If I want to become a black belt, I can study all the theory I want in the world, but if I'm not going into the gym and putting myself in uncomfortable situations and being willing to look at myself in the mirror and be honest about the work I'm doing or what I'm not doing, never going to be a black belt. But the cool thing is a black belt is just a white belt that never gave up. So I appreciate you making all the time for us. The very last question, the most important question, given you made time for us, I wanted to give you my platform. Is there somewhere you can point them that you want to connect with people? My audience is all yours.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I am on all platforms. Just search The Giant Thinker. on Instagram, LinkedIn, especially as well. I'm most active on there, on Clubhouse, where Justin and I met as well. But yeah, send me a DM. You know, there's nothing here that I think people can't use right away. But if people do want more specialized information, they can just send me a DM, or you can go ahead and book a discovery call on my website, ramcastillo.com, and we can go from there. But send me a DM. I'd love to hear from you if you enjoyed any of these tips and insights. And yeah, it'd be nice to just meet people from all over, which is exactly how Justin and I met, and we're building those relationships. These relationships, you know, a lot can go a long way from a DM. So reach out and hit me up, The Giant Thinker.
I appreciate you making time. And again, so many great, concise lessons. If you're watching on YouTube or you're listening to the audio podcast, make sure you check out Ram's links in the notes. Make sure you hit that replay button, grab a pen and paper, and don't forget to hit that subscription and notification button so you don't miss any future incredible thinkers like Ram. And I'm sure he'll be back on another episode. And I'm excited for your journey, my friend. Take care.
Thank you so much. See you, everyone.